Hi, everyone, and welcome to PRISM's webinar, 10 Basic Financial Steps for Special Needs Caregivers. My name is Allison Stefanok, and I'll be your host this evening. I'm a PRISM's board member, and I'm also a mom to an incredible 9-year-old daughter diagnosed with Smith-Magenis syndrome. This webinar is brought to you by PRISMs. PRISM stands for Parents and Researchers Interested in Smith-Magenis Syndrome, and is an organization dedicated to providing information and support to families of persons with Smith-Magenis syndrome, sponsoring research and fostering partnerships with professionals to increase awareness of SMS. PRISM's webinar series was developed with the goal of sharing information with the SMS community directly from the experts in an easily accessible and dynamic way. A recording of this webinar, as well as all past webinars and a listing of future webinars, can be found on prisms.org under the Education tab. If you have a question for our speakers during the webinar, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and at the end of the presentation, we'll take some time to answer as many questions as we can, although we may not get to all of them. Tonight, we will be talking about 10 basic financial steps for special needs caregivers. This is part one of a two-part series presented by Kelly Piacenti and Jerry Hulick from MassMutual. Kelly is head of special care with MassMutual based in New Jersey. She oversees partnerships between MassMutual and the largest special needs nonprofit organizations across the country. Kelly serves on the National Board of Directors for the ARC and the advisory board for the Academy of Special Needs Planners, as well as the American College MassMutual Center for Special Needs. Kelly is also the mother of a 19-year-old with special needs. Jerry is the founder of the Washington Group Special Care Team, whose mission is to help make a positive difference in the lives of individuals with special needs, their caregivers, and other family members. Welcome, Kelly and Jerry. We're so fortunate to have both of you as our speakers tonight. We really do appreciate you being here with us. The work that you do is inspiring and I know greatly appreciated by the families that you work with. So I know you guys have a lot to cover tonight, so I will turn it over to you now.
So much, Allison. Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. Jerry and I are pretty excited to present this webinar tonight. As Allison had said, I'm Kelly Piacenti, and I head up the Special Care Center for MassMutual. I'm also a special needs mom, but really the reason that we do most of what we do is because we're very actively involved in the special needs community, and we want to help educate families like mine. One of the biggest things that we run into is the worry that many of our families have. So tonight, Jerry and I are going to walk you through the 10 basic financial steps that you should be thinking about. We all know there's a lot on your plate. There's a lot of things that you need to think about, but it's something that if you have in the back of your mind, you know at some point in time, you're going to have to do it. So right now, before I introduce Jerry Hulick, I'm going to kick off our webinar. First of all, I have to tell you that this information provided is not written or intended as specific tax or legal advice. MassMutual, its employees, and representatives are not authorized to give tax or legal advice. Individuals are encouraged to seek advice from their own tax or legal counsel. Individuals involved in the estate planning process should work with an estate planning team, including their own personal, legal, or tax counselor. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is really what's important to you as a caregiver. As a caregiver of a person with special needs, you're the one who's looking out for their best interests. And for me, it's always been, what's going to happen when I'm not around? Who's going to step in? Who's going to provide that type of care that I provide for my son? So when we think about this question, I think about the fact that I have 4 children. And for my son, Nicholas, I always have that little thing on my shoulder telling me that the care for him will be a little bit different. He'll need care for his entire life, where the other ones will be able to take care of themselves and provide for themselves. So what's most important to me, the thing that kept me up at night, is really who's going to step in when I no longer can. So step one is really to start thinking about planning for the future. So when you plan for the future of your dependent, many of us receive government benefits and we think that everything is going to be covered, or if we have someone younger, they're in school and everything is covered by the school or therapies that they're getting after school or through private health insurance. But when you're thinking about planning, you really need to think about medical treatments. What type of treatments are they going to need the rest of their life? Is the insurance that they have going to be able to cover those type of treatments? Are the treatments they're receiving covered by insurance? And if not, where does that money come from? Education is a big one for our families. Many people years ago with any type of IDD didn't go to college, didn't really go to high school. Now, many people with developmental disabilities and special needs are going on to college and have higher education expectations. So what's going to happen when it comes to education? Skill development is key in our area. Many people don't even realize that they need the skill development to go forward or to get a type of job in the future. And how about employment? There are some employers that are great in hiring people with disabilities. Who are those employers? And how do I prepare my son and my daughter to get a job when it's time? Are they able to get a job? And if they're not able to get a job, what will they do? So those are some of the things that we think about. And how about housing? Housing is a big one. I'm in the state of New Jersey. My friend Jerry, that we're going to introduce in a few seconds, is in Virginia. Obviously, some of you are all over the country. Some of you are in Georgia. And the housing in our states is very, very difficult for people with special needs. There's a lack of housing. The waiting lists are tremendous. So if you're a son or your daughter, you're thinking about a different type of housing for them, what's available? Who's going to pay for it? What type of housing is it? Is it something that's acceptable to you? Do you want to keep them in the home that they grew up in? There are many things that you need to think about when it comes to planning. How about transportation and travel? Do you take them to all their appointments right now? Will you need a caregiver or someone to step in to help with transportation? Will you be able to train and work with them to take their own public transportation? I don't know, I'm close to New York. Right now, there's no public transportation that any of us want to go on right now. But what would happen in the event that that was in your state and you had to get the person that you're caring for somewhere? Social and recreational. We never want to forget that, because once school ends, or at the age of 21 or 22, when the school program ends, what happens then? All their friends, all the things that they're used to, that goes away. So what type of social or recreational programs or events are you going to plan, and how do you go about doing that? So when we talk about planning for the future, these are some of the things that we take into consideration.
I think
my friend Jerry Hulick, I apologize.
Many times we deal with a lot of different issues, and we're not even exactly sure what the future is going to look like. And I know many times in planning, I'm dealing with younger people and who are just now developing. And so planning a vision out for a long period of time is sometimes going to be very difficult. If we have in mind our lifestyle, have in mind what we would like to see and envision for those in our family that may have special needs or may have special things that we need to be anticipating as they age out. And a lot about personal integrating it too with what the family needs are as a whole, and what needs to take place on that basis. So wherever we can get feedback, wherever we can get information that allows us to build a better vision for what we see for the future, really identifying our priorities and our concerns, and really what we want to focus on for our entire family, including those in our family with special needs or disabilities, then we want to do that. Now, when we look at one of the key things is we know with some of the government benefits, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a few minutes, is that the beneficiary arrangements are very important, because of basically there's a asset test or an income test that we can't have any more than $2,000 in the name of the individual. And that basically is something that we need to be concerned about in overall planning. Many times when we're talking about some of the government benefits, they may not come into play until the child reaches age 18 because the parent's income is deemed in the equation. But if we look at various different events that might take place, a catastrophic event with losing a parent or other things that might happen, part of the planning really needs to look at all the assets that a family has, all the way from employer benefits to the individual assets and instruments that the family might have, to the government benefits, and make sure that we're titling the ownership, the transference, and the beneficiary designations so that we won't disenfranchise a possible government benefit that could be paid in the future. So beneficiary arrangements are critically important. Many times we forget about things like our 401ks or our group life insurance that we also need to make sure point appropriately to the right place to not disenfranchise our child. Something as simple as an HSA. If something were to happen to a parent, that's going to pass to the other family members. And so all of these things need to be looked at and reviewed from the standpoint, how does it pass on transference? What will take place, whether it be bank accounts with paid on death or transference of death with brokerage accounts or stock accounts or life insurance or 401ks or retirement plans. All of these things need to be looked at. And so when we get more into the legal instruments, you begin to see how these all fall together. So Kelly, we talk about the family meeting and communication, and I've always kidded and said that I think we literally have a presentation we do for communication amongst the family.
Absolutely.
I also kidded that I think we could have a special program on just how to communicate between spouses, because I think sometimes spouses tend to divide and conquer, and maybe some will be doing certain things and others will be doing other things, but communication is critically important. These family meetings of what we're trying to accomplish becomes something that we have to, really be dealing with. So Kelly, what would you add to that going through your own personal situation?
Well, I mean, I guess a couple things. First of all, the special needs community, we have a tremendous divorce rate. Our divorce rate is 98%, which is crazy. I'm in that 2%, but it's all about communication. I think that's something that we talk about a lot. Having a family meeting to discuss future needs is always on our slides, because I get calls every day from the 50-year-old sister that no planning was ever discussed with her. The mom or the dad passes away and they're expected to step in. This is something that the communication wasn't there. There was no discussion when the mom was alive. We always say that you should sit down with your family members and kind of figure out, this is what we're going to need. Who would be able to do this? Who would be able to provide the same type of care that I provide for? My son was not able to speak or really communicate at all. So when it came time for a family meeting, I have a lot of great siblings and family friends that, all want to jump in and help me. But let's be honest, taking care of my son was a lot. So is that really something that I expect others to do? By having a family meeting, you kind of get it out on the table. You talk to everybody about what role they may want to play. You also can discuss your concerns about future care and options. It's not something that you have to have etched in stone. It's something to start the communication. These are the things that I want. These are the things that I'm thinking about. As we're doing this webinar, I just got a question from somebody, and that's kind of what I was trying to answer, is that how do I tell, or how do I know what the future holds for us? Actually, you probably don't. I mean, what I always say to families, and it's certainly not being condescending or fresh, but it's plan for the worst and expect the best. There are many things you can do from a planning perspective that you can have in place, and if you don't need them, you don't have to use them. What we always say is that if you try to put a plan in place, it's great, it's there if you need it, but if something changes and a diagnosis changed, or their abilities are changing and it has to be reversed, you can do that as well. So in your family meeting, you can start the dialogue. You can start talking about what you think you may need, but as the family meetings progress, it's going to be different each time. So we're just trying to get you to open up the lines of communication. If you're in a situation where it's, the parents are divorced or you're not living together, you still need to have that family meeting so that everybody's on the same page.
I think it's important to recognize too that there's multi-generations involved, and so many times extended family may have very good intentions. Grandparents may be setting money aside or buying bonds or doing certain things, and if it isn't communicated, then they may not have the same complete understanding of what needs to be done to protect those government benefits. And so by communicating what's taking place, communicating what you've accomplished in your planning, then that avoids those kinds of situations where inadvertently something might take place because the planning wasn't integrated beyond just the immediate family, or beyond those that might be involved in the caregiving, particularly around some of the financial issues and wanting to preserve and conserve on those government benefits that might come into play in the future. So when we look at this, we're looking at, person-centered kind of planning, but it might involve a lot of these same people that you see listed here. You're going to basically form a group of people that can give you the particular expertise that you need in building the plan around your vision, around your priorities and concerns for the future. Clearly, we believe a financial professional. These days, we have special care planners. The American College has the Chartered Special Needs Consultant designation, which is letting you know that these are financial professionals that have done a lot of extra education and work around the special needs arena, government benefits, legal instruments, and how they all integrate in public and private programs that might exist within the sectors. Special needs attorney groups, there are two of those main ones. There's, of course, the elder law group that does a lot of estate planning, with the Special Needs Alliance and the Academy of Special Needs Planners. These are attorneys that specialize. And just like you wouldn't necessarily, go to a real estate attorney if you had some sort of specific need, this is a specialty area. So we strongly encourage that you seek out special needs attorneys that really understand this space and the integration of all these different benefits. It's a little even harder to find sometimes accountants and CPAs that understand some of the special tax deductions that will come into play and special things that you need to do around planning. But it again is a very important piece or a person that needs to be a part of the overall planning to integrate it, to make sure that you're taking advantage of a lot of the tax programs that exist when you've got expenses, particularly around your special needs situation. Health professionals, therapeutic people, all of those are going to be critically important in looking at the lifestyle and the needs, as Kelly mentioned earlier, of the individual involved, even guidance counselors or social workers or caseworkers that may have been involved with, or any other advisor, whether it be religious or spiritual advisors, could be recreational in nature, could be all those life skill kinds of things that we're interested in doing. We need that feedback as we're building guidance around creating a team that's going to talk about the lifestyle, the needs, the priorities of the individual, and the vision that you have for them going into the future. So anything to add there, Kelly?
No, I think that's good. I'll cover more on our next slide.
So these are additional resources?
Go ahead, that's fine.
No, you go ahead.
Well, we do this all night, so get ready, right. So a couple of things, and step 5 is really look at your local nonprofits. Clearly you're involved with a nonprofit right now. Those are some of the biggest resources for our families, but it's not just for the person you're caring for. It could be for a sibling workshop. It could be for an aging caregiver. It could really be for a variety of topics. It could be on financial planning. We know you have a lot on your plate, but some of these additional resources could make your life a little easier. We do get government benefits. There's a lot available to our families, and we'll talk about that. But everything else really could come through the nonprofits. A lot of our nonprofits have programs, and when the world is normal, we have programs and different activities that the people that we care for could participate in. Newsletters, publications. As a special needs mom, I wasn't always involved in special needs, but as my son was born, I found out more and more that there are a lot of resources out there that could help me. One of the things that one of my friends gave me and said, you're probably not going to like this, but they gave me a copy of a magazine called Exceptional Parenting Magazine. And it was really, now it's online, you can go online, and I don't believe there's a cost to it. And it really talks about some of our families. It talks about some of the challenges that we go through. And also, another thing to think about is support groups. There are a lot of support groups for families that have special needs dependents. Maybe you just need somebody to sit and have coffee with. But what I've always learned the most from is other parents that have gone through it. And if there are people that don't have the same diagnosis, or, just maybe they do have something similar, you're sitting down, talking to them, seeing how they're handling certain things certainly can be helpful. Government agencies, we're going to get into it more, but there actually are government agencies that are there to help us, to provide us with government assistance regardless of your income. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight as well.
I think tonight, this webinar is a perfect example of support groups and resources that can come from many nonprofits. And so there's so many that are out there. It's interesting, since the COVID has arrived, the number of webinars that we constantly see that are being done by the various different nonprofits based on a lot of the different issues. So the resources is there. It can be a bit overwhelming, but many of these kinds of things are being recorded, and so they're going to be online. And so we encourage you to always be looking to stay current and be looking at these as resources. Government agencies, don't forget, there's a lot of federal programs, but there's also a lot of county programs. So we want to make sure that you take advantage. We always are interested to find that many times our families find out about something through another family that existed, not necessarily because the governmental agencies are going to be out there promoting a certain program or sending out a newsletter or something like that. We almost have to stumble into some of these things. And so it's important to not discount in the local county offices even some of the programs that might exist on that basis. So now when we look at those government benefits, there's really two different components, major pieces of the government benefit programs that are going to come into play here. The entitlement benefits is what we all pay for. This is what, oops, I'm sorry. The entitlement benefits is what we all pay for. This is what we're paying into Social Security, our employer's matching. If we're self-employed, we're paying the entire freight. That includes retirement, it includes disability benefits, and it includes benefits at death. There's 3 life events that will come into play with entitlement, and that's a premature death, a disability, or making it to retirement. When you see here on the entitlement side, the survivor benefits, I think we're more familiar with, some of the benefits we see at retirement. We get our statements. And by the way, they no longer send out Social Security statements every year. They're only sending them out every 5 years. They're saving a lot of money there. So we encourage that everybody go online to ssa.gov and establish your own account with Social Security Administration so that you can check your Social Security statements. They're only coming out every 5 years, but you can only make corrections for 3 years. So if they happen to capture your income incorrectly, if you don't correct it within that 3-year period of time, then that's going to be a lost benefit. So the Social Security retirement is what we all tend to focus on. You can go out as early as age 62. Full retirement for most now is running around 67. They encourage us to not take it, and for every year that you stay beyond full retirement to age 70, it increases by about 8%. That's a relatively simple calculation to do for your own benefit structures. But as I go down, you see Social Security disability, which we can all be eligible for if we were to become disabled through a car accident or a heart attack or something that might take place. But below that, you see survivor benefits. And that's benefits coming to family members based on one of those 3 life events that I talked about, a premature death, a disability, or making it to retirement. So in each one of those 3, there are potential benefits to go to other family members if something were to happen. The children's disability benefit, the last one you see on that's probably one of the most missed benefits of all of our entitlement benefits. If you've got a child with a disability, then when you reach retirement or have a disability yourself, then your child potentially, if they're not able to make a substantial gainful wage, then they're going to get approximately 50% of what your Social Security income is. So if you went out at 62, if you've got a dual working family, one parent might go out earlier than the other. Then they can start, the child with a disability that's there will start getting that benefit of 50%. In addition to, doesn't take anything away from the parents, in addition to what the parents are getting, parent or parents are getting. And then when a second parent goes out, if their wage is higher, then it's going to flip to the higher wage. So these are benefits that are critically important, that if you're going to be doing planning, you really have to consider these because they should be included in everything that you're trying to do. So the other side, the public assistance side, is the SSI, which generally the family's income is going to be deemed in the equation until the child's age 18. Medicaid, what's going to come into play, and then public supports. These are, the food stamp program, what's now called SNAP, the various different health subsidy type programs. Some are going to be come from the federal side, but be administered on a county basis. These are significant in nature. So obviously, clearly, if I've got a child that can't make a substantial wage, if I don't build in 50% of my Social Security retirement that's going to continue to them for their life after I pass away, then that jumps from approximately 50% to approximately 75%. So if I were making $2,000 in my Social Security retirement, my child with a disability could be getting as much as $1,000 a month. And then that's going to jump up to $1,500 when I pass away. So these are significant benefits to understand. The Social Security Administration has a really robust site. So if you go on to get current statements, to look at current statements, and that's something that's going to be critically important. And you're going to see on a statement your retirement benefits in the section, and you're going to see below that family benefits that are going to be there for either disability and or family benefits payable to other family members if one of those life events happens. And then when you start looking at the supplemental security income or SSI and Medicaid on the other side, your children, those with disabilities, are going to always get the higher any benefit eligibility is there. So we also see people get confused over when they're on SSI, wanting to maintain that because they don't want to lose Medicaid. But once you've been on SSI, even if you qualify for certain entitlement benefits, you're still going to be able to qualify for continuation because of various rules for Medicaid. So they're all things just to really understand that it's critically important when you're planning to make sure that we're not missing out on some of these benefits that exist. And that's the importance of dealing with a special needs attorney or dealing with a financial planner that has an understanding of special needs planning, because it's a very unique and different area. So now when we look at one of the next things that can be very, very confusing for people is the legal structure. And you want to have a legal structure that ties in with what you're trying to accomplish financially. And because of the means test for a lot of the public assistance benefits, the minimum of not having any more than $2,000 in the name of the child, then all these various different legal instruments are going to come into play. And so, first starting with kind of what you're looking to do from an intent standpoint, and preparing what that vision going forward is. That's part of the communication with the family. It's part of laying out kind of that plan and what the intentions are as to what you see for the future. Guardianship is something that is going to become an option or something to be considered. We're not suggesting one way or the other, guardianship or alternatives to guardianship, but it is something when the child reaches the age of majority that it needs to be dealt with to say, is this appropriate? What do we need to be thinking about here? Kelly said one of the things is looking at successor caregivers, guardians, trustees, who's going to be around. And what we like to see there is multi-generational in nature. Wills are basically directional items. That's the basics. And you can put a lot of direction into a will as to what would take place as regards successor caregivers or even guardians. These days, advanced medical directives are very important for parents and all the family members, because if you don't have that, you can't get information. It's that simple. I had a situation with a nephew whose wife was in a car accident, no other car involved. She was in a coma for several months. My nephew started getting bills on a constant basis, dunning notices and everything else. But you know what? They wouldn't release any information to him because there was no medical directives in place. We ended up having to go to court and get emergency guardianship just so he could access information for all the bills and things that he was receiving. The durable powers of attorney really is anticipating things happen. Sometimes we need to make sure we're covering our flanks from that standpoint, and it integrates with the estate planning, the legal structure, certain types of special needs trusts that might come into play with other family trusts if the kids are younger. And so the titling, as we said, of the various different assets and instruments that you might have and how those point, whether they go to trusts or whether they go there. Many times we're not going to be able to have a lot of money go to children under the age of 18. It's not legally going to happen. And so we've got to anticipate the various ages. We've got to anticipate the various needs. And we're trying to work around all the various different aspects. And so you can't really complete a plan without also looking at the legal aspects of what needs to be completed, along with the financial aspects, and have those merged together. This is why we promote, like on the bottom of this slide, where we see the two major attorney groups and how you can, and basically you go online and identify attorneys in almost any area of the company, and at the same time, be in a better position to work with the professionals that really understand this particular space. So now I talked about trusts. When you look at special needs trusts, these are trusts that when they're set up, basically preserve the ability to get government benefits. So you can accumulate assets within these trusts and at the same time still qualify for government benefits. And that's why the importance of integrating that legal with financial is very, very critical. There's been changes in even retirement law most recently about passing it to children if a secondary beneficiary and or to a child with special needs. And so all these come into play. Third-party trusts are set up by, say, a family or parents for the benefit of their child. First-party trusts will be when there's a settlement or some sort of an event that there might be some sort of dollars coming in and inheritance, things like that. That's money coming directly to the child. It's their own money. Has to be set up on a first-party basis. Pooled trusts are trusts that are designed in the nonprofit sector to pool together people's money, still compartmentalized to get more institutional investment and management. And then the Fairness Act that passed in 2014 allows an individual, where it used to be first party had to be set up by somebody for the benefit of that individual. Now individuals can set them up for themselves if they've got the capacity to do so.
So Joe,
go ahead.
So just a couple things so that, because we did get questions on, how do I prepare? What we're really trying to do, and I mean, what we have the ability to do as special needs families is have the best of both worlds. So I have 4 children. I would like to leave them all the same amount of money, but clearly with my son Nicholas, I could never leave him money straight out because that would bar him from government benefits. Because government benefits tell us that if you have anything over $2,000 in your name, then you would no longer be eligible for those government benefits. So a special needs trust, I mean, we don't advocate for it either way. Same thing with the attorneys that you go to. They don't work for Mass Mutual. We don't provide that service through Mass Mutual, but we are suggesting that you work with individuals that specialize in this area because it is so unique and so specialized. So when it comes to a special needs trust, it's really a way to have the best of both worlds. I can leave my son all the money that I want in a special needs trust so that he can have that extra iPad or live in that better house that I want him in, or have that type of orthotic or that type of treatment that's not covered by insurance, and then he can get every government benefit that's out there. A lot of our families will tell us, well, Kelly, we don't really need government benefits. Well, up until the age of 18, technically, there's not a lot that you're going to be eligible for. It's based on your income, not the person with the disability. When your child turns 18, regardless if they live with you, they could live with you in $1 million home. You could have everything in the world, but they base it on the individual. So at the age of 18, and technically there's a look back period, so just about the age of 13, the government would start looking. You don't want anything in their name over $2,000, because when they turn 18, even though they may live with you, you have no plans for them to go anywhere right now, they would be eligible for all those government benefits that Jerry was speaking about, because when the government looks at them, they're looking at them as an individual, and if they don't have any assets, they don't have anything in their name, then they are eligible for all of those government programs. The way that you can put money aside for them is a couple ways. We're giving you some different types of trust that you can put money in for them, and they can still get government benefits. But it's really, how does it protect my dependents' government benefits eligibility? Well, Jerry's going to go over it a little bit with you, but this is really the way to have the best of both worlds. Not everybody is ready to have a special needs trust. Not everybody is ready to, spend money and have one established. And if you're not able to do that, there's a couple ways to do it. You can leave language in your will that will have a special needs trust established upon your death. That's one way to protect you. But in the event that your aunt and one of your aunts dies and leaves the person with special needs money that you don't have a special needs trust, you could bar them from government benefits. You run a risk when you do it upon your death if anybody in the interim leaves them money. But if there's nobody else and you're the only ones leaving that individual money, that may work. One of the reasons to do it now is because you can set it up. If you use it, great. And if you don't have to use it, as that woman who was asking me, how do I plan? Then you can have it discontinued. But if you have it there and you get any money in their name or want to put money away, as soon as it's in that trust, you can utilize it for the benefit of that individual. So, it's just something to think about. It's the way to have the best of both worlds, but everybody's not ready for it. A trust can run you anywhere depending upon where you are in the country. I've heard of trusts from, $1,500 to where I am in the New York and New Jersey area to $8,000. So it really depends on how basic it is or how elaborate you need it to be. But it's something that you need to think about in a great way to be able to put money away for that individual or include that individual with all of your other financial planning considerations.
So, those are great points. And I think that the big distinction we see the majority of are these third-party trusts, which are trusts that are set up for the benefit of the individual by someone else, generally parents or even grandparents.
Right. We're not going to deal with too many first-party trusts because, as you had said, the first-party trust is only as a result of maybe a medical malpractice suit, an accident, something that somebody left the individual the money. So if money was to be left directly to your dependent and you didn't have anything set up, when you went to set it up, you'd have to do a first party because that money was already left in their name. You really don't want a first party unless you need one because there is a payback provision on a first party, whereas on a third party trust, there is no payback provision, which means you can get all the government benefits in the world. You can have $1 million in a trust or $5 in a trust. But when the person passes, the government cannot go after a third-party trust and say, hey, we paid for all these things during their life, we want our money back. They can't do that with a third-party trust, but they can do it with a first-party trust because there was a settlement in there. So what I suggest is if you have a first-party trust, you should be spending the money on the individual. That's what it's there for. If you don't, and you take government benefits upon the death of that individual, the government's going to be looking for reimbursement for what they paid for the Medicaid.
And I think that, Kelly said you could do it in your will, and that would be leaving testamentary language to set it up. But that's a perfect example of some monies came in, and there really isn't a trust to put it. The other side of that is you can set up a special needs trust and not necessarily fund it currently, but only title and have beneficiary and transference that takes place upon the demise of parents or something like that. So many times people won't fund it, but then they'll point their life insurance or they'll point retirement plans or whatever to these trusts after death, and that way it remains flexible to make changes and things like that. So again, the importance of understanding that the biggest issue for special needs trust is they create and have language that preserves the government benefits. And Kelly made the point also. A lot of people will say, well, I really don't need the government benefits. Well, those government benefits are ultimately monies that can accumulate for the lifestyle of the individual involved. And I've never had anybody come back and say, oh, well, we had way too much money. We shouldn't have set as much aside. No, there's always going to be needs there. So to the extent we can, we should take advantage of every possible thing we can in that process. So Kelly, why don't you talk a little bit about guardianship?
If I can get off mute there. And Joe, we have a couple questions in the chat if you want to look at them. But when it comes to guardianship, years ago, a person with an intellectual developmental disability, it was a given that, prior to the age of 18 or at the age of 18, the parents would get guardianship of that individual. So the way it is in this country is that even though my son lives with me, not able to speak, not able to do anything, at the age of 18, I would have to apply for guardianship for my own child, even though I'm taking care of them. Because as far as the government is concerned, that person is their own individual, regardless of their abilities. So in order to oversee medical or any type of financial decision for them, I would have to apply to the court for guardianship. Years ago, guardianship was simple to get. I could say he's developmentally disabled. I want to get guardianship. It would be no big deal. It's not like that anymore. Today, the courts take a really good look at why do you need guardianship? Why are you taking their rights away? Because many individuals with developmental disabilities were having their rights taken away, but they were able to live independently and make their own decisions. So the court looks very closely at some of the guardianship requests now. It's not an overnight process. You have to petition the court. If you're working with an attorney, they'll often do this for you. But keep in mind that not everybody needs guardianship or conservatorship. I always tell my families, it's really up to you. It's not up to us. We don't have a view on it either way. My concern has always been, and will continue to be, is that it's not my son that I'm worried about. It's the people that try to prey on some of these kids or adult kids. And that's my concern, that the person they sit next to on the bus decides to use their name and take out a credit card and explains to them, I'm not really taking anything from you. I'm just going to use this credit card. And they don't understand. Or I'm going to borrow your iPad and I'll bring it back tomorrow. So really, guardianship and conservatorship, it's really having the ability to help them with some of the medical or financial decisions. And if you have an individual you're caring for that isn't capable of doing it, it's something you need to take into consideration. It's not an all or nothing. You can do partial guardianship. You can do guardianship over certain things. If you just need, it over medical because they can't make their own medical decisions or won't take their medication, or maybe financial because they can't make any decisions when it comes to money or credit cards, and you don't want someone to take advantage of them. So this is something that you need to speak about as a family or help the person with that decision. Conservatorship, financial decisions, medical power of attorney, medical and some residential, group homes, durable general power of attorney, financial decisions may include education. If my dependent is under 18, we are considered the ones that can make those decisions for them. But the second that they turn 18, you need that paperwork in hand. I'll give you a perfect example. One of my friends, the daughter was in a car accident on her way home from her program. The mother immediately, just like me, went to the hospital, wanted to start telling everybody what they could do, what they couldn't do. And the doctor said to them, do you have guardianship? Do you have guardianship papers? And the woman I'm speaking about, her daughter was 19, and she said, no, she's my daughter. And they said, well, without those papers, we're not giving you that information, and we really don't have to listen to what you're requesting. So it's something that always sat with me and bothered me because it's not just for my child with special needs, it's for my typical children as well. What type of provisions, what do I have in place that if anything happened to them, how could I help them? What could go into play immediately so I could help them with some of the decisions? So as Jerry's saying, this is all part of planning. Can I say to you which one you should have? No, not necessarily. It really depends on your family and the person that you're caring for and what their abilities are and what they're able to do. So guardianship is something that you need to take into consideration.
So let's move on to the next topic about having identified a care provider. So Kelly, would you address that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we talk a lot about, really, how do I show the kind of care I would personally give to my dependent? It's really identifying somebody that could step into your shoes. And that's going to change throughout their life. as they're little, there may be certain people around you, maybe your parents, maybe your siblings, but life happens. Is that person going to be around in 20 years? Are you at the point that the person is turning 20 years old and the needs are different? So when you look at care providers, you want to look at somebody that can do everything that you do. With my son, it was a great deal of care. It was 24/7. Is that really something that my sister with her 4 children could really take on? And was she the right person to provide the same type of care that I provided? Would I want him to live in our home? Would I want him to live in a group home? What were her feelings on that? How could she help? How could she do the things that I did? So it's something to take into consideration. You also need to think about the financial aspects of it. I mean, I often, talk about my sister who is very similar to me, but the problem is that when it comes to financial, she has the same shopping issue that I have, and that I don't think she's good with money because, she's obsessed with shopping. So is she really the person that I want to leave my son's trust under, and all of this money that I want to go to him or for his care? Not that she would intentionally do anything wrong, but it's a conversation you need to have. And when you identify a care provider, that's part of it. And then how do you have that conversation? I love you enough to take on, the day-to-day care, but I don't love you enough to do the financial. That was a rough conversation. But how do you explain that you want one person to do the care, but the other person to do the financial? And really, all kidding aside, it was a rough conversation, but the conversation was, he has no way to get any other money. This is it. This is what he's going to have the rest of his life. I just want to be sure that he's taken care of and that the money is there for him. And that's why I need this other person to take care of the financial aspect of it. But I wouldn't want anyone else to care for him except my sister. So, I mean, there's things like that. It's very, very difficult. It's unique to each family, but it's a conversation you need to have so that you can really determine what the person wants to do. As I said in the beginning, we have a lot of siblings that the parents assume, that the siblings are going to take over. I have 2 older children that I believe would easily have stepped in, but is that really what I want for them? How about their significant other? Is that what they want? Do they really want to do this day in and day out? And what's that going to do to their marriages or their home life? I mean, it's a conversation you need to have, and we can't always rely upon the siblings because the siblings resent us for that. We want them to be part of their life, but what part of their life can they be part of? For me, it was making sure you visit your brother, making sure that financially he's okay, making sure he has everything he needs, and making sure on holidays and people are visiting him and checking in on him. That's what I really wanted his siblings to do. And that's the conversation I had, but I didn't want them to be the care providers. So it's something that you need to think about.
Well, and again, Kelly, you make the important point. So much of this is around the communication and talking through it. And it's a difficult discussion sometimes to bring up. But you can bet that particularly when you talk about the siblings, they're already thinking about it. And so,
right, and some families don't have the conversation.
Right.
They never have it.
Right.
And then somebody passes away, as I had said, and everything breaks loose. Like, why didn't she tell me I was going to do this? I have a job. I'm in Texas. My brother's in Pennsylvania. How do I do this? So, I mean, you're right. The communication breaks down. We assume that everybody's going to help us out, but it's not always the case. And life happens. What if I put all my eggs in one basket and I want his sister to do it, but his sister's no longer around? What happens then? So, I mean, it's something that you should be communicating and discussing on a regular basis.
Very good. So, we go backwards.
Yeah, I think we went backwards.
So would you like to get into the letter of intent a little bit? We talked
Sure.
about it briefly.
We're gonna try to finish up so that we can take some questions as well, but this is a really important step. This is a letter of intent. Really, what is it? Why does my dependent need one, and how do I create one? Well, first of all, a letter of intent is not a legally binding document, but it has been used in the court of law and it has been upheld. What I say to my families is, if you've done nothing else, many of our families don't have wills, don't have trust. They've never even thought about what they're going to do. They think about it, but they've never actually done anything. A letter of intent is something you can write down in a notebook. It's something that we can provide you with the form that we have here at Mass Mutual. And what I say is it's a letter to the babysitter on steroids. So when your children are young, you leave instructions to a babysitter. This is what I want you to do. This is what I don't want you to do. That's exactly what the letter of intent is, but it's much more intense. This is a letter that talks about all of your hopes, your wishes, your dreams for that individual. If they're able to help you write it, they can write it with you. You can talk about religion. You can talk about marriage. You can talk about who you want them to live with. You can talk about where you want them to live. You can talk about where you never want them to live. You can talk about individuals that have been wonderful and so helpful that you always want in their lives. Or you can talk about individuals that have never been in their lives that you don't want anything to do with. You can speak about doctors that have been fantastic. And what I always say is, and there's the doctors that I wouldn't bring my dog to, that my son has been to. There were, my son had over 100 seizures a day. How did we handle those seizures? What did we do? What were some of the things that made him happy since he wasn't verbal? I mean, how do you bring up a child that doesn't like chocolate? Who tells you that? That's something you need to write down. I have very strict views on baseball teams. If you haven't sensed it, I'm from New England originally. I'm from the Boston area. I live in the New York, New Jersey area. One of the things in my son's letter of intent was, don't ever take my son to a Yankee game, because I absolutely would not want him to go there. But I think if he could speak, he'd say the same thing. So it's anything that's unique about the person you're caring for. It's the type of therapies that have worked. It's the type of therapies that have failed terribly. He was on the ketogenic diet. I wrote down everything that happened with the ketogenic diet, all the medications that have been fantastic, all the medications that never worked and were no good for him. Those are some of the things that we write down. Activities that he enjoyed. What soothed him? I have friends that, you can take their son to a park. If you take a right-hand turn and go around the lake 3 times, that will calm him down, regardless of what's happening. If you take a left-hand turn and go around the park, that will set him off even more. That's something that she has written in her letter of intent. So it's anything that you want to say about the individual, or the individual can say, so that God forbid I don't come home that night. It's in my house, it's with my vital documents. Somebody could pick it up and say, hey, these are the hopes, the wishes, and the dreams of really what she wants for her son. So some courts have looked at them and said, hey, this is what the mom wanted. This is what we're going to take. This is what we're going to go on. So what I say to families are, it could be in a notebook. Mine's about this big. I'll show you my hands. Mine's about this big. You could do it once a year. You could do it once every 6 months. It really depends on the treatments and the therapies and what do you want to say. We have people that do videos. He did so many therapies that I could just write a book on the therapies. So why not do some type of video that they can plug in or that they can watch on their phone, and then they're able to do it. So a letter of intent for me is something that if you walk away with nothing else from this webinar today, consider writing a letter of intent. Talk about the individual. Tell others what's good for them, what's not good for them. One of the things that I always wanted to put in mind was that, when it comes to housing, I didn't want him to live in a group home, but those were my hopes. I mean, that's not that everybody out here says, oh, group homes are bad. Group homes are great in many states, but where I am, they weren't great group homes, so that wasn't what I wanted for him. But we have many families that talk about marriage. Many individuals with IDD get married, and families want that, or families are adamant against that. But it's not you making the decisions. It's really telling about the person, telling others what the person, would like to say, but maybe can't say, or what you want to say on their behalf. So nothing else tonight. I just want to make sure that you all think about writing a letter of intent. And I'll certainly send Allison our form. We have an electronic form so that you can consider starting to fill one out and putting it with your vital documents.
Very good, Kelly. So when we start talking about the planning again, I think the issue is to bring together professionals to help you with this process. And really, in some aspects, starting with that letter of intent, which really begins to set the stage for what your priorities and your concerns are and what you want somebody to focus on. If you're going to be dealing with a financial planner, you want them to focus specifically on the things that are important to you. It shouldn't be something that's generic. Every plan is a little bit different. So we really encourage that you deal with financial professionals that have a focus in the special needs arena. Mass Mutual has special care planners, and there's also those out there. Many of the special needs planners at Mass Mutual have the Chartered Special Needs Consultant designation, as well as other practitioners across the country. And we talked about the 2 attorney groups. Those are two key professionals that really are the crux of so much of the plan that takes place. The financial coming together with the legal structure that then can be used and passed to anyone to help in the implementation process. Mass Mutual has the planners. We have a lot of resources, as Kelly said. Kelly's involved with a lot of different nonprofit partnerships. We can introduce you to various special needs attorneys and different trust funding arrangements. But Kelly, why don't you talk a little bit more about some of the partnerships that you've been involved with in the nonprofit sector, and then we'll move to the summary for the evening.
Sure. And, we have special needs planners across the country. I'm actually responsible for making sure that they're all properly trained. And as you can see, we really just want you to work with any individual that's trained in this area. You don't have to work with people at Mass Mutual. We have over 500 advisors that are parents and or caregivers or are actively involved in nonprofits. So there's a reason that they practice in this area. It's not an area that people just fall into and say, this is what I'm going to do. So about 86% are like myself. We work with a lot of nonprofits across the country. Some of the bigger ones that we work with are Easter Seals, United Cerebral Palsy, the ARC of the US, Huntington's, you name it. We certainly are there to help nonprofits, to provide educational information, very similar to what we're doing tonight. We work with National Down Syndrome, Autism Speaks, the Autism Society of America, Special Olympics. It goes on for quite a while, but really it's so that we can help educate families about the planning process and, make you start thinking about it. We also work with the special needs attorney groups. We do not employ them. We don't have special needs attorneys at Mass Mutual because we really want you to take a look at attorneys, look at 3 or 4, make sure that you ask them the question when you do reach out to them. We can give you a list of attorneys that are part of these organizations, but what I always say to my families are, ask them the question, how many trusts have you done this year? If somebody's done 1 or 2 trusts, I think I would run out of there because as Jerry had said, when I'm getting a divorce, I'm not going to go to a real estate attorney. It's the same deal with special needs. You want someone that specializes in this area and that's going to give you the best advice. When it comes to funding, obviously, we're an insurance company. There's a large variety of funding options. Many of our families don't necessarily have the means when they're alive to set up a special needs trust. They leave life insurance to a special needs trust. They leave an inheritance, but we could certainly talk to you about that as well. But really tonight, we're trying to educate you and get you to start thinking about the planning process, because finding quality professionals to assist you is key. Make sure that you're the expert about the person that you're caring for. Think lifetime care and quality of life. Don't just think about right now, think about in the future. The one thing that I always say is, I want my son to have the same life when I'm not around that he had when I was around. So just think about lifetime care and quality of life. So now, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and we are going to be here to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Jerry. That was a fantastic presentation. I know that planning for the future is something that weighs heavy on all special needs parents' hearts. So I hope everyone enjoyed this presentation and learned as much as I did tonight. Before we move on to the question and answer portion of our webinar, we have a wonderful feature family video to share with you. meet Dawn and Garrett Mock.
Hi, my name is Dawn Mock. I live in North Carolina. We have a son, Garrett, who is 18. He has SMS. My husband is Bill. We have a daughter, 21, and a son, 16. We got Garrett's diagnosis back in 2004. He was 2.5 years old. One of the first things the doctors gave us or mentioned was Smith-Magenis syndrome, and gave us the website, the prison's website. And of course, we went straight home and we looked it up. And as soon as I got on the website and read about SMS and saw the children, we knew that Garrett had Smith-Magenis syndrome. Having that information was the critical part of how we navigated those early years, those early days. But more importantly, it put us in touch with an awesome group of support people. The spring after Garrett's diagnosis, we went to our first PRISMS conference, and just the most welcoming atmosphere, the most supportive atmosphere, and it was, you know, like a homecoming. And I don't know where we would be without PRISMS. The members of this awesome tribe that we're in to help us navigate this crazy rare life together. I just can't even describe how important all of these people are in our lives. So we're so grateful for Maggie and the early SMS pioneers and Anne, and just so thankful for them and everybody else that continues to support and make this an awesome organization. I couldn't get Garrett on video with me, but I wanted to just share him with you, show you what he loves to do. We like to go to CarMax every Sunday. It gets us outside, it gives us exercise, we're in the sun, and he can get in the cars and test everything out. So here he is. What is it?
Toyota Supra Launch Edition.
Is it unlocked?
Type fit.
Is it a stick shift?
No, it's like this, like the BMW.
Oh, wow.
You just have to thing like that to move it. It doesn't have a back seat, Mom.
It doesn't?
No, what happened if it was like this?
She's pretty tall, huh?
Should we...
Thank you so much, Dawn and Garrett, for putting that video together and sharing your story with us. And thank you also, Dawn is a great PRISMS volunteer, so thank you for all that you've done for PRISMS throughout the years in the SMS community. So now we have time for Kelly and Jerry to answer some questions. We may not get to all of the questions this evening, but we will do the best that we can. And let's take a look. So the first question that we have is, does an SMS individual need an advanced medical directive?
Kelly? Kelly must still be on mute. I mean, I think to the extent that capacity is there, because to do an advanced medical directive does require some level of capacity on a legal standpoint. And just because of HIPAA and the way they've tightened down on all the rules around HIPAA, to the extent the capacity is there, in other words, it can be understood what they're signing and agreeing to as regards a medical directive, then I encourage anybody and everybody to try to have one. Even as kids are growing and aging out, reaching the age of majority, things happen. And HIPAA really precludes a lot of sharing of information. And so I think it's important that to the extent possible that we get medical directives for pretty much anybody when they have the capacity to do so.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that I spoke about. I don't know how involved you are in the individual's medical decisions, but someone like me was one of those helicopter mothers that I had to, make all the decisions. I wanted to be right there. I think a medical directive will help you. So, I mean, it is, for me, I think that it's never going to be a bad choice. I think it's something that you should consider. And like I said, it depends on the individual, but I don't think it would be a bad choice either way.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much. So this next question here is the care provider an individual, like a family member or an agency that provides those services? Does the will or letter of intent need to identify the care provider?
Well, I mean, the care provider can be a family member. Many of our families work with a family member, but there are agencies that do that as well. We have some individuals that don't have anyone else. Maybe it's just the two of them. And, I had recently an elderly mom pass away, and there were no other family members. So in the state of New Jersey, there were other nonprofits that would take that on and would help with that. So that is available in every state. I'm pretty much sure. Jerry can correct me if that's wrong, but in the letter of intent, you can certainly identify the care provider. Keep in mind, it's a running document. So as things change, you could.
We lose her?
And as things change over the years, I changed that as well.
And I think, again, the letter of intent's important. You might identify a group, you might identify multiple groups. I mean, I think a lot of it is preferences as to what the preferences might be. You see Medicaid now reimbursement for a lot of personal attendants. And that can also now include in many of the states that have expanded Medicaid, even family members. And so it's a way maybe sometimes to even generate some additional income to the family as a unit. So I think it's just to understand what's best for the situation and try to capture that in the letter of intent. And all options are kind of open, and even Medicaid today is even recognizing that.
And do as much research as you can now. I mean, things change over the years, and certainly your letter of intent from now, and when you look at it 10 years, could change quite a bit. So what I always tell families are, research the care providers now. If you're looking at a group home, go and see the group home. Take the person that you're thinking about putting in the group home with you so that they can start getting used to it. One of the problems that we have with many of our families are they put these great plans in place, but they never introduce the individual with the disability to the place that they're going to live. Now I've seen more families, start getting them in the group home while they're still alive so that they can go visit them. They can get them accustomed to it versus when a parent or a caregiver dies, then their whole world changes, their living changes, their housing changes. Try to do as much of that when you're alive so that when somebody passes away, it's not all change for the individual, that the individual is actually a little bit accustomed to it and used to it.
Well, and it's not static either. I mean, if we look at the IEPs and what's available through the education system because of the IDEA Act that's now been in place almost 30 years. I mean, what we see in education today, when we go back, that's changed just
drastically.
Huge amounts. The same thing is happening in any areas of transitions. We're seeing more recreational opportunities, more social opportunities, more transportation opportunities, and basically a lot of housing opportunities that didn't exist even 10 years ago. So
and we as parents are thinking out of the box for housing. We're thinking out of the box for housing now too. I mean, if you don't have housing available, I have many friends that buy a building or buy a condo, and then the state is paying for the workers to come in and care for the individuals, or they're rooming with another individual and the parents are paying for the rent, or they're getting it out of government services. So, I mean, everything has changed quite a bit, but it's really being on top of it, doing as much research now as you possibly can.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. That really makes sense. So our next question is, my attorney suggested a discretionary trust for behalf of my daughter rather than a special needs trust. Is there a difference?
Go ahead, Jaron, then I'll put my 2 cents in.
First and foremost, we are not attorneys. So, with that information, it's very difficult to say exactly what the situation is. But a special needs trust per se has the language that's necessary to preserve the government benefits. So it would be more a function of exactly the way that discretionary trust is written and what language is there, because we'll hear them called by different things sometimes, whether it be, D4A or different kinds of trusts or those kinds of things. But you just want to make sure what the purpose of the trust is. And if you're trying to preserve government benefits, that the appropriate language is there. And it's not, one size doesn't fit all. And as Kelly said earlier, that doesn't mean that everybody needs a special needs trust. And today with ABLE accounts also available to us, that's another financial instrument where we can set money aside and still qualify for government benefits. So that's the best non-answer I can probably give.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a special needs trust is for everyone. It really depends on how the person is doing. Some individuals won't need a trust because they're going to have a regular job, they're going to be able to live independently, and they're going to be able to make their own income. There's no problem with that. They may not need government assistance. But like the thing that Jerry's saying is that special needs trust has very specific language in it that protects the individual. So if you have an individual like my son was, then you want to think in terms of, I have to do everything I can to protect him because he's going to need every government benefit in the world. So for someone like me, there would be no other option other than a special needs trust for anything significant. If I wanted to set up an ABLE account, I see that as like a little bit of a spending account, a checking account, gives the person with a disability some independence, so that a 30-year-old doesn't have to go to their mom and ask them, for $10 to take an Uber somewhere. So it gives them an independence. But keep in mind, a special needs trust, ABLE account, anything that you're thinking of, it's for the benefit of the individual with special needs. There's a lot of tools out there. A special needs trust isn't right for everyone, but if it's for someone that wants to protect government benefits, wants to make sure that it's in place, then a special needs trust is the way to go. Not for everybody. You can only set it up, I think, until, the age of 64. I think beyond 64, you can't do it, but it could be there. And if you use it, great. And if you don't have to use it, even better. But I think it's a good tool for many of our families. But as Jerry's saying, it's not for everyone.
Well, the other side too is that, and it's a great question there, and that if you don't, and I would strongly encourage this, don't implement anything that, whether it's a financial instrument, whether it's a legal document, that you don't fully understand what you're trying to accomplish and what the intent is. And so, have the professionals explain, in this case, if you said discretionary versus an S&T, then why the differences and why one over the other. You need to understand it as it applies to your specific situation. And not every instrument's the same. This is not cookie cutter, and the planning is individualized. And so the legal structure around the financial plans is individualized. So just, don't do anything. That's one piece of encouragement. Don't do anything that you don't fully understand, and make them explain it to you.
Right. And depending upon the age of the individual, you have up until about the age of 13 before there's any look back period or anything like that. So you have some time if it's a younger person. And if it's an older person, just make sure that you do your research and that you know exactly what you're buying into before you say yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's see, we have another question here. The question is, it's my understanding that the disabled individual has a cap on monthly income. I believe it's no more than $2,000 a month to qualify for other state and federal benefits. If they're able to benefit from the children's disability benefit through SSI, can that hurt other benefits potentially available, pushing individuals over the monthly limits?
That's yours.
There's about 7 different component pieces of that question. Let's start. SSI is a public assistance benefit. So that's coming through. Right now it's at 783, and that includes a component for housing. And that's based on a means test of no more than $2,000 of assets accumulated. So you couldn't have a checking account with $2,200. That would make you ineligible. That's the asset test or means test. That's not the income test. There's an income test that goes with SSI as well, but you can earn up to about $1,671 in a month and still qualify for $1 of SSI. So as you make more money, there's an offset as it grows. So that's the public assistance side. It has the means test and also has the income test of a limitation today of about $1,671. And then it would go away. The children's disability benefit is not public assistance. That's an entitlement benefit under our Social Security system that we all pay for. So if the children's disability benefit, let's say I'm retiring, I'm 67 years old, and my disability benefit or my retirement benefit is going to be $2,800, and I have a child with a disability that was disabled prior to the age of 22, then that child is going to be eligible for 50% of mine, which is $1,400. Well, when you look at the offset, then this children's disability benefit is going to literally wipe out the SSI payment because of all this additional money that's coming in. But if I was on Medicaid before, then I'm going to be able to maintain Medicaid and still get the higher benefits. You're always going to get the higher benefit structure of whatever you're eligible for. So people try to preserve SSI. And in many instances, we have a lot of instances because of Social Security where retirement incomes of parents are wiping out the SSI because the children's disability benefit was so significant. And their biggest concern sometimes is the loss of Medicaid. Clearly, if they can get more income. Well, so if that children's disability benefit wipes out SSI, they can still maintain Medicaid. At the same time, they're going to get the higher of all benefits. And because it's now an entitlement benefit and not under public assistance, it's part of Social Security, there isn't the same income restrictions as you see with SSI. So the child could actually make a little bit more money. So think of all of this from a disability standpoint. If you go out on a disability because of a car accident, well, if you start making substantial wage, and usually, it's got to be in the 40 to 50,000 range because it depends upon a lot of other factors, back to work credits and things like that that you can pay credit for. Eventually, you'll lose the disability benefit. So under entitlement, under our Social Security system. So the bottom line is if they can't make substantial gainful wage, then they're going to still qualify for the children's disability benefit. The more money any of us make on disability, the less that's going to be an offset to us continuing that disability benefit. Same thing if we have a child getting a children's disability benefit, they start doing well. And we know a lot of individuals where they've suddenly become quite successful and a lot of entrepreneurial type businesses and things like that. And then that disability benefit's going to stop because they're just flat out making too much money. But separate the two: children's disability benefits and entitlement benefit, SSI, public assistance.
Great. Okay, thank you. We have one last question for you guys this evening, and it is talk more about preserving government benefits and what it means to have less than $2,000 in assets. Does state federal agencies monitor assets monthly or annually? Can it be over $3,000 in January and then in March, $1,000?
They actually monitor it on a monthly basis.
They absolutely do. And keep in mind, it's not just money. It could be a vehicle. It could be a piece of art, a piece of jewelry, anything that has, well, actually, it's not the vehicle because if the vehicle is used by the individual, that's not considered. But it could be a piece of art. It could be a ring that somebody left them. But they absolutely do monitor it. So you don't want to go over the $2,000 limit. You want to keep it under the $2,000. One of the ways that they can do it, Jar, can't they put it in ABLE?
Yeah,
Can't they put it into an ABLE account?
I would mitigate as much as I could in any account that has the individual with the special needs name on the account. So a representative payee account of an SSI account, you don't want to maintain any substantial balance. You want to get it out of there, either spend it down or transfer it over into an ABLE account. I mean, we have people kind of track the expenditures and reimbursing themselves. I mean, as a representative payee, you get a report every year where you have to say that you've spent it down. So the issue is don't exceed the $2,000. You literally, I've seen situations where families went over by $1. The problem is by the time Social Security says you went over, several months have generally gone by. So they make it retroactive that you owe them back money for that full time that you were over. So you want to make sure that you're staying under. It's looked at on a monthly basis. I have been amazed that the feeds to the Social Security system are extraordinary. I've had, parents, grandparents have $1,000 worth of bonds that they took out because all you need is a name and a Social Security number, and they didn't mention anything to parents. And all of a sudden you go into Social Security and they're saying, well, what about all these bonds? And the parents knew nothing about them. So they get a feed from anything that earns interest. Anything accounts that are out there, they're getting a feed from all the banking institutions and all the mutual fund institutions.
Right. So, I mean, you're really, getting the money to spend on the individual. So you should be doing that. We can charge at the age of 18, we can charge something called lodging. It's not rent, it's lodging. And many of our families say, well, I'm not going to do that. Well, you definitely can. I mean, that's part of, money that you'll be missing out on if you don't claim it. So if the individual is living with you, you can certainly charge them lodging. And that's something that you can take out of there and use it for something else. I mean, it is for their lodging, but if you needed to put towards your mortgage or you needed to put towards food, that's what you're getting it for.
Well, you can quantify monies as it's coming in. I mean, you could quantify and say, well, approximately X amount goes for food every month, approximately X amount for clothing, approximately X amount for other living type of expenses, X amount for lodging, and showing on paper that you're spending it down because it's money you've been paying out of your pocket before anyway. Well, that's money that's effectively then cash flow to the family that could be reallocated any number of ways. We see many families just turn around and reallocate that to ABLE accounts.
Great. All right. Well, I think that is all the time that we have for questions this evening, or really, actually, that's all the questions that we have for this evening. We did get through all of them tonight. So Thank you guys so much for that. Thank you. Thank you for being with us this evening. We really, really do appreciate all of this great information. I know this is going to be a fantastic resource for our families.
And Allison, if you want us to send you the letter of intent for those that participated tonight, we'll get that to you. And if you have any questions that come in after for Jerry and I, we'd be happy to answer them. They can certainly reach out to us. I think that you can provide them with our information, but we're happy to answer any questions or help you guys in any way we can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that offer. I appreciate it. So everyone, this is not the only webinar that Kelly and Jerry are going to do for us. They are going to have part 2 of the financial webinar series, and that will be on December 8th, and it's titled Creating a Special Needs Legal and Life Care Plan. So be sure to join us for that. Be on the lookout for an email with a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as a survey. All of our webinars are now on the PRISM's YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media. Also, if you are not a PRISM's member yet, please be sure to join. Membership is free, and it's the best way to stay up to date with all things SMS. Also, PRISM's is a nonprofit organization. All of our programs, including this webinar series, are fully funded by our generous donors. If you're interested in supporting PRISM's and the programs that it provides families impacted by Smith-Magenis syndrome, please visit our website, prisms.org, and consider making a donation. So this concludes our webinar for this evening. Everyone, have a great night, and thank you again, Kelly and Jerry.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Take care.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.